I knew something was wrong before I even shut off the engine. You ever have one of those moments where your gut figures it out before your eyes do? Like some part of your brain is already screaming danger while the rest of you is still catching up. That's exactly what happened to me that Sunday evening. I turned into my driveway after a long weekend away, my headlights sweeping across the front yard, and for a second I honestly thought I was looking at the wrong house. There was a trench, a real trench, fresh dirt piled on both sides. Orange conduits stretched across the lawn, little warning flags sticking out of the ground like somebody had planted them there to celebrate what they'd done. My sprinkler system was destroyed. Half the flower bed was gone. Worst of all, the roots of a young oak tree were sticking out of the ground where somebody had dug right through them. I just sat there with both hands on the steering while staring at it. The engine kept running. The headlights stayed on. And all I could think was, who in the world gave somebody permission to do this? Now, to understand why this got under my skin the way it did, you need a little background. My name's Ryan Cole. Back in 2018, after a rough divorce that took a lot more out of me than I ever admitted to anybody, I bought a house outside a small town called Briar Creek, Kentucky. Nothing fancy, just a modest place with a big yard, mature trees, and enough space between neighbors that you didn't hear every conversation through your bedroom window. That house became my reset button. Every other weekend, my daughter Lily came to stay with me, and we built routines there. We'd grill burgers on Friday nights, watch old movies, plant flowers that usually died because neither of us knew what we were doing. The place wasn't perfect, but it felt like ours. Then the developers arrived. The farmland behind our neighborhood got sold to a company called Redstone Development Group. Within months, construction crews started pouring in. Trees disappeared. Roads appeared. Giant gray houses started popping up so fast, it looked like somebody was printing them out of a machine. Along with all that came the Homeowners Association. And with the HOA came Vanessa Holloway. Now, every neighborhood has somebody who enjoys having a little authority. Vanessa enjoyed it a little too much. She was in her early 60s, always perfectly dressed, always driving around in a golf cart that looked newer than most people's cars. She had opinions about everything. Mailbox colors, grass height, holiday decorations, the position of trash cans. One afternoon about 7 months before the trench appeared, she showed up at my porch carrying a clipboard and wearing a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She asked if I'd be willing to cooperate with future infrastructure improvements connected to the upcoming development phase. That was her exact wording. Infrastructure improvements. I asked what that meant. She said access. Just access. Nothing else. No details. No explanation. Just that word. I remember laughing and telling her if somebody wanted part of my property, they could start by bringing legal documents and a very large check. She laughed too, but hers felt different. Like she wasn't laughing because something was funny. She was laughing because she thought she'd eventually get what she wanted anyway. Standing in my destroyed front yard months later, I suddenly remembered that conversation. Every word of it. The next morning I walked outside carrying coffee and a level of irritation that probably wasn't healthy. There was already a construction worker standing near the trench holding a clipboard. Young guy. Looked exhausted. I asked him what happened to my yard. Without even looking up, he said, fiber installation for the new subdivision. I pointed at the trench. Through my property? He shrugged. Actually shrugged. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. The HOA said this section falls under community access rights. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Because I knew my property lines. I knew exactly where they were. And I knew that statement was complete nonsense. What I didn't know yet was whether somebody had made a mistake, or whether somebody thought I was stupid enough not to check. I wish I could tell you I handled it calmly after that. I wish I could tell you I went back inside, made a few phone calls, and approached the situation like some perfectly rational adult. Truth is, I got in my truck and drove straight to the HOA office because the second that worker mentioned community access rights, I knew exactly who I needed to talk to. The HOA office sat inside a small clubhouse near the entrance of the neighborhood. It always amused me how seriously they treated that building. You'd think it was City Hall the way some of them acted. When I walked through the front door, Vanessa was sitting behind a desk typing on a laptop. The thing that bothered me most wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't say. She didn't look surprised to see me. Not even a little. She glanced up, smiled, and said, "Good morning, Ryan," like she hadn't just overseen the destruction of part of my property. I stayed standing. Why are people digging through my yard? She closed the laptop slowly, deliberately, like she wanted me to understand. She controlled the pace of the conversation. Then she folded her hands together and said, "It's related to utility access for the expansion project." "No, it isn't." That tiny smile appeared, the one I'd seen before. The smile people wear when they think they're the smartest person in the room. "Ryan," she said, "you really should understand the situation before making accusations." I laughed, actually laughed, because the arrogance was unbelievable. "Then help me understand. Show me the paperwork." The smile faded a little. "We're not required to provide internal development documents on demand. You dug through private property. You're part of a community. My deed says I own that property. Sometimes homeowners need to make sacrifices for future growth." There was again. Growth. That word kept coming up. Growth. Progress. Community benefit. Funny how those phrases always seem to appear right before somebody tries taking something that belongs to someone else. I left before I said something that would make things worse. On the drive home, I kept replaying the conversation in my head. Something wasn't adding up. Vanessa wasn't acting like someone who believed she was right. She was acting like someone who thought she couldn't be challenged. And those are very different things. That afternoon, I pulled every document I had out of a fireproof safe in my bedroom. Surveys, closing paperwork, title records, county maps, anything related to the property. The kitchen table disappeared under stacks of paper. Lily happened to be staying with me that week for summer break. She wandered into the kitchen carrying a bowl of cereal and looked at the mess. "You building a fort?" I laughed. "No." She looked around. "You look stressed. Kids notice more than adults think they do." I smiled and told her I was dealing with some stubborn people. She nodded. Then she said something funny. "You're stubborn too." I couldn't even argue with that. The next morning, I went down to the county records office. Now, if you've never spent time in one of those places, let me save you the suspense. They're not exactly exciting. Rows of filing cabinets, old computers, the smell of paper that's been sitting around longer than most people have been alive. That's where I met Diane Walker. She was probably in her 70s, wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and seemed like the type of person who knew where every document in the building was hidden. I explained the situation. She listened patiently. Then she started pulling records. 20 minutes later, she turned her monitor toward me. No recorded easement. I blinked. "What?" She checked again. Still nothing. Then she checked a third time. Nothing. No active easement. No pending easement. No filing request under your parcel. I felt my pulse speed up. "Are you sure?" She gave me a look that basically translated into "Son, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive." Then she lowered her voice slightly. "You'd be surprised how often people assume homeowners won't verify things." That sentence followed me all the way back to my truck, because suddenly this wasn't looking like a misunderstanding. It was starting to look intentional. Still, I wanted more than county records. I wanted proof. That afternoon, I called a guy named Hank Mercer. A friend of a friend recommended him. Former utility surveyor. Tough old guy. Permanent sunburn. The kind of man who looked like he'd spent his entire life outdoors arguing with heavy machinery. He arrived with scanning equipment loaded into the back of a pickup truck and spent nearly an hour examining the trench. I followed him around while he worked, mostly because I was too anxious to sit still. Finally, he stood up and wiped sweat off his forehead. "This is a mess." "What kind of mess?" "The kind lawyers enjoy." That got my attention. He pointed toward the trench. "No permit markers." Then another spot. "No county inspection tags." Then another. "Wrong spacing on utility indicators." I asked him what all that meant. He looked at me for a second. "It means either somebody skipped half the process." He paused. "Or somebody expected nobody would check." There was again. The same conclusion. Different person. Different expertise. Same answer. By then, my irritation had turned into something else entirely. Determination. That evening, my next-door neighbor, Frank, came walking across the yard carrying a beer. Frank was a retired Army mechanic who somehow knew everything happening within 3 streets of our neighborhood before anyone else did. He looked at the trench, whistled, then took a long drink. "They really thought you wouldn't fight." What do you mean? He glanced around before lowering his voice. You ever notice how friendly Vanessa got with the developers? I shrugged. He continued. I've heard things. What things? People talking. Now, neighborhood rumors are usually worth about as much as expired coupons. But Frank wasn't usually the gossiping type. He told me he'd heard Vanessa had been attending private planning meetings with executives from Redstone Development for nearly a year. Not HOA meetings. Private meetings. Again, no proof. Just rumors. But suddenly a lot of pieces started fitting together. The pressure. The confidence. The refusal to show documents. The assumption that nobody would question anything. That night, I made one final phone call. A property attorney named Michael Grant. Former Marine. Quiet voice. Sharp mind. I emailed him photographs, surveys, county records, and Hank's preliminary findings. About 45 minutes later, my phone rang. I answered. Michael didn't waste time with small talk. His first words were, "Do not let them continue construction." He said applies. That's serious? Ryan, if everything you've sent me is accurate, they're exposed from multiple directions. I waited. Then he said the words that changed the entire situation. Trespass. Property damage. Unauthorized excavation. Potential permitting violations. He paused. And honestly, this may be worse than they realize. For the first time since seeing that trench, I felt something I hadn't felt all week. Hope. Because up until then, it had been me against the system. A homeowner against developers. A regular guy against people with money, connections, and influence. But now, for the first time, I had someone telling me the law might actually be on my side. And by the following morning, that hope was about to turn into something much bigger. Because Michael wasn't just preparing paperwork. He was preparing a fight. And the people on the other side had absolutely no idea what was coming. The next morning started quietly enough. Too quietly, actually. Around 9 o'clock, I was sitting on the back porch drinking coffee when my phone buzzed. It was Michael. Paperwork's filed. That was it. 3 words. But those 3 words kicked over a domino that had apparently been standing for a very long time. Less than 2 hours later, I heard engines outside. Not one truck. Several. I looked through the front window and saw construction vehicles pulling up near the trench again. Workers started unloading equipment fast, moving with the kind of nervous energy people have when they're trying to finish something before someone tells them to stop. Then I saw Vanessa. She climbed out her golf cart and marched straight toward my porch carrying a thick folder under her arm. No smile this time. No friendly HOA voice. No pretending. The second I opened the door, she said, "You need to withdraw your complaint." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was such an incredible thing to hear. The complaint about people digging through my property? Her jaw tightened. You're jeopardizing a major development project. I leaned against the porch railing. Sound expensive? That answer hit a nerve. Her face changed immediately. Do you have any idea how many families this project will serve? Did all those families need 6 feet of my front yard? She stepped closer. Her voice dropped. You're making powerful people very unhappy right now. There it was. The threat hidden underneath months of HOA language. No more community growth. No more neighborhood improvement. Just pressure. Pure pressure. And strangely enough, hearing it out loud made me less afraid. Because once someone stops pretending to be reasonable, you stop wasting energy trying to reason with them. I looked directly at her and said, "Good." Then I went back inside and closed the door. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A text from Frank. County vehicles incoming. I walked to the window, and there they were. 2 white county inspection trucks turning onto my street. Right behind them came sheriff deputies. The neighborhood transformed instantly. Curtains moved. Garage doors opened. People suddenly discovered urgent reasons to stand in their driveways. Within minutes, half the subdivision was watching. The inspectors stepped out carrying clipboards and site maps. One of them was a gray-haired woman who looked like she had spent decades dealing with bad excuses and no longer had patience for any of them. Meanwhile, the construction crew froze. One deputy raised a hand. Nobody touches equipment. I don't know why, but hearing that felt incredibly satisfying. Vanessa hurried across the yard. This is all a misunderstanding. The inspector didn't even look at her. Can you provide recorded easement documentation? Silence. Vanessa opened her folder, closed it, opened it again, then finally said, the documentation is connected to pending development approvals. The inspector raised an eyebrow. So there is no recorded easement. Another silence. Longer this time. The superintendent from Redstone Development stepped forward. Big guy, red face, mud on his boots, clearly unhappy. He tried explaining that surrounding homeowners had been informed construction could impact nearby lots. I finally spoke. Impacting a lot and excavating through private property aren't the same thing. One of the deputies actually smirked. After that, things moved fast. The inspectors walked the trench from one end to the other. Photos, measurements, notes, more photos. Every few minutes somebody discovered another issue. Missing permit markers, improper erosion controls, inspection violations, incomplete documentation. At one point, the gray-haired inspector shook her head and quietly said, "Whoever approved this rushed everything." That sentence seemed to suck the remaining confidence right out of Vanessa. Because here's the thing about people who get addicted to authority. They start believing authority belongs to them. They forget it's borrowed. And the moment someone higher up arrives, everything changes. About an hour later, one of the county officials approached carrying a printed notice. He handed copies to the contractor, to Vanessa, and finally to me. Official stop work order. Immediate suspension pending investigation. I watched Vanessa read it. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely uncertain. Not angry, not confident, not superior, just uncertain. She looked up at me and asked, "Are you happy now?" I thought about it. Then I said, "I'll be happy when my yard is fixed." The following weeks were absolute chaos. Investigators kept showing up. Lawyers kept showing up. Apparently, once county officials started looking closely, they found problems extending far beyond my property. Permit issues, inspection irregularities, drainage violations, paperwork discrepancies. The deeper they dug, the worse things looked. Suddenly, everyone started blaming everyone else. The developers blamed contractors. Contractors blamed consultants. Consultants blamed the HOA. The HOA board acted like Vanessa had made every decision herself. Funny how quickly people abandon ship when the water starts rising. Then came a phone call from Michael. I still remember laughing when he told me. They want to settle. Already. Apparently, Redstone Development wanted this situation buried as quickly as possible. The agreement included complete restoration of my property, replacement of the irrigation system, payment of legal fees, compensation for damages, and formal acknowledgement that unauthorized work had occurred. No admission of liability, of course. Corporate lawyers never allow that. But everybody understood what it meant. They lost. Over the next couple of weeks, crews returned to remove everything they had installed. No swagger, no confidence, no shortcuts. Every foot of conduit came back out of the ground. Every damaged section got repaired. Every mistake got corrected. One afternoon, I sat on my porch watching workers roll fresh sod across the repaired area. Frank walked over carrying another beer. He stood beside me for a moment and nodded toward the crews. "Whole neighborhood's talking about you." I laughed. "Good things or bad things?" He shrugged. "Depends who you ask." And honestly, that turned out to be true. Some people thought I protected everyone's property rights. Others thought I delayed progress because I was stubborn. A few believed both. Not long afterward, Vanessa resigned from the HOA board. Nobody officially explained why. Nobody needed to. The expansion project eventually moved forward using an alternate route that completely avoided private residential property. And that may have been the most important discovery of all, because it proved something. They could have done it legally from the beginning. They just chose not to. About a month later, Lily came over for the weekend and helped me plant a new oak tree near the repaired section of yard. The original tree survived, surprisingly enough, but we wanted another one there anyway. Something new, something that belonged to us. As we packed dirt around the roots, she looked up at me and asked a simple question. "Did you win?" I remember sitting back on my heels and thinking about it. Because winning is a funny thing. Sometimes it means getting money. Sometimes it means getting even. Sometimes it means proving somebody wrong. But standing there beside my daughter, looking at that repaired yard, I realized none of those things mattered most. So I told her the truth. I think I just stopped somebody from believing they could do whatever they wanted. She nodded, then went back to covering roots with dirt. Like that answer made perfect sense. Maybe it did. And honestly, that's where I'd love to hear your opinion. If you were my position, would you have fought back even if it meant becoming the neighborhood troublemaker? Or would you have let the project continue to keep the peace and avoid the conflict? Do you think protecting private property is always worth the fight? Or are there situations where the greater good should come first? Let me know down in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where you stand on it. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, an overreaching developer, or someone who thought the rules didn't apply to them, share your story too. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.